Hey there, shooters. Mike Seeklander here with Team Wilson Combat. I know you normally see me on the range talking technique, but here I'm with my buddy Austin talking some exciting stuff today.
How's it going, guys? My name is Austin Proulx. Been a member of the Wilson Combat shooting team for about 8 years, and I guess we're going to talk about some guns today.
Guns, gear. Let's just kick it off with a key subject. You know, Bill and Ken have their Gun Guys video series, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking maybe this is the Young Guys video series.
Yeah, definitely. At least one of us are. So.
Wait a second. Are you making fun of my blondish, sun highlighted beard?
The salt and pepper.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm kind of copying what you got going on there, but
so if we're having fun with this, I have to ask this, man. So in recent years, you won your first national championship.
Yes, sir.
Right? And then you decided after winning that national championship that you try to cut a finger off and make it a little harder on yourself. So
right.
Tell us about your finger. Let's tell them about your finger, man.
Yeah, middle finger on the left hand. Still have a day job for some reason. Dropped a big chunk of concrete on there and essentially just tried to blow it in half. But it's mostly grown back. It's still kind of goofy looking, but I'm a shooter, not a hand model, so it works out. Got most of the feeling back in it and no real pain. So
you're literally just loading concrete and crushed it and literally almost severed the whole thing? Or?
Yeah, I was tossing big busted up chunks of concrete into a dump trailer, and one piece kind of sat on the top edge and was starting to fall back towards the fender on the boss's new trailer, so I was trying to save it, and didn't really affect much except crushing the tip of my finger and breaking it, blowing the nail off. It split clear across, almost lost about half the tip forward, but they stuck it back on there and threw some stitches in it, and I was back to shooting 3 days later with a big old bundled up wad of bandages on there.
Honey badger don't care though, right?
Honey badger doesn't care.
Honey badger doesn't care. So here's my question for you, man. You pulled off a IDPA Nationals win.
Yep.
What if you were to tell them, the viewer audience, what changed? Because I've been shooting with you for years now. I don't even know how many years now it's been. It's been years. What is there something you would say changed in your training, in your mentality, in your ability to perform at that level? What do you think changed? Anything?
If I had to try and chalk it up to one thing or a couple of things, I would say my focus on being accurate and consistent. Especially in IDPA, I used to be able to outrun the points, and then they went to a full second per point down, and I try as I might, wasn't able to outrun that. So I really had to focus on working on my accuracy, being accurate all the time, at close ranges when you're building that speed, and at distance when you need to slow down and give it a little more respect to the sights and the trigger. And then on top of that, being consistent throughout the day. Because for a long time I would have a burner stage, and then a couple not so great stages, and then a burner stage, and then an average stage. And it really got to the point where I realized that if I just have stages consistently where I'm at 75%, then I wound up winning a lot more often. Because you would see other people that are doing that same thing.
And if you haven't seen Austin shoot, that's him. That's your style. And I think maybe someone, I'm not sure who it was, might have mentioned this years ago that, hey, Austin, if you back off the speed dial just a little bit, because you would either burn it down or break it. Just break. Things would just go literally fall. And there was no like, he's gonna kind of burn it down. It was like, he's gonna burn it down and crush everybody. And man, when the wheels fall off, the wheels fall off. So the interesting thing about that is when you tend to back off on the speed dial a little bit, the shooting is easier. I don't know if I would say it's boring, but it's easier when you're not trying to go 100%. So what got in your head? What caused you to change that mentality? What do you think your epiphany was?
Well, I know what you're talking about when it feels easier. It feels like you're shooting slow, and you end up with the best stage times. And I think it's just kind of relaxing and getting into a groove, and that's where I found that consistency. But for me, it was more of a shift of focus. I wasn't focusing on going fast anymore. I was focusing on making sure I got my hits, and then I was still going just as fast. So it wasn't really necessarily something that I changed. It was just altering what I was focusing on, and everything else kind of improved around that, because I wasn't rushing my reloads and bobbling them because I was worried about going faster. I was falling back to the level that I practiced at. It was just pure muscle memory. I wasn't, rushing my shots and having errant shots that I shouldn't have at distances that I shouldn't have. It was just shifting my focus to accuracy and finding that groove, and it relaxed everything else and made it much easier.
Man, I tell you, I think that's so important. When you're really trying to go fast, I mean, that's like the danger zone. That's that red line zone. And we don't need to compete in that zone very often. I mean, there's no value there. There's too much risk. And I'm not saying that, that we should never go there. There's, if you're a good gamesman, if you're a good competitor, okay, I'm at a point in a stage right now where I need to push. Or I need to just compete. And to compete might be shooting at that pace where you're minimizing mistakes. I find that really interesting. It just reduces some of the anxiety and stress. It reduces the possibility of failure. So very interesting, man. So tell me, I've always been curious, you're young, you're very athletic. Obviously you're a great shooter. You run a very kind of unique grip. We'll talk about that a little bit. You tend to roll your hand a little farther forward. You and I've talked about that at matches in terms of pressure on the gun. And a lot of that comes from your natural athleticism strength. But what is your training like? Tell people about your training. How are you practicing?
So I subscribe to frequency over duration. And I find that, like a lot of people, it's hard for me to get myself to dry fire because sometimes it becomes a chore. And there are a lot of tools and systems out there where you can use laser systems or like the cool fire system. So you've got a reciprocating slide. Turns it almost into more of a game. That's how I view that stuff. Is it makes it interesting for me. I know there's value outside of that, but for me that stuff kind of just makes it interesting, brings more fun back into it. But I force myself to dry fire as many nights a week as I can. Obviously I'll work late some days or just have a really rough day at work where I just don't have the energy when I get home. But I try to do 15 to 30 minutes at least, draws and reloads, because those are the two manipulations that I use the most in matches. And most of the rest of my training I do live fire.
So when you say you embrace frequency versus duration, so we're talking about like if you could dry fire practice six or 7 days a week. Let's say you had a perfect week and you dry fired 7 days a week, and you got maybe a bunch of short live fire sessions in where you go and you have a few mags prepped up and you go and shoot for 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes versus just going to the range and shooting 1,000 rounds on Saturdays.
Exactly. Exactly. Because if I go to the range, let's say 5 times a year and shoot 1,000 rounds on each one of those, I'm not going to gain much. But if I can shoot, like you said, a few days a week, and then if I have that good week where I can dry fire every single night, I'm developing a lot more consistency. I'm developing a lot more solid muscle memory. I'm making those neural connections between what I'm feeling, what I'm seeing, and what I'm trying to accomplish. It's a lot easier for me to develop that with that consistency and that frequency versus volume and duration just occasionally.
A buddy of mine said the message is in the reps. The secret is in the reps. And I guess the more frequent you're doing those repetitions, that's super valuable. So you've competed across the board in almost every division. I know we talked about carry optic there. I know you shot CDP for a long time with your dad. I know you shot CCP. I don't know about bug. Your first nationals was CCP, right? Tell me why you're going. Why would you switch divisions, or what's caused that, and what's it been like for you to do that, man?
So I started off in CDP, and I shot CDP from the time I was 13 until I was 20, I think. And I just grew up shooting 1911s and 45, and that was what I liked to do. And it was kind of a novel thing because there weren't a lot of junior shooters that decided to just jump in and shoot 45. So that was kind of fun, and I'd done that for long enough. And CCP was a relatively new division, and it was essentially my full-size 45 just shrunk down. And switching over to 9 was, having shot 45 forever. Switching to 9 was essentially like shooting a BB gun out there. Just no recoil. Everything was super easy. I could rip off super fast splits, and that was fun. It kind of brought something new back into the game for me. I picked it up naturally because, again, the manual of arms was the same. All of my gear was the same. So I didn't have to change much. It was a really natural transition for me. The reason I started doing carry optics was for police training, because I do that now, competition training. So I started my own training company. Law enforcement, typically they want to see their instructor using something that mirrors, at least to some extent,
Sure.
what they're using.
Yeah.
You go out there with a full-blown race gun, they can always say, well, it's because you're using that gear. But if you go out there with what they're using,
Right.
they can say, okay, you're using the stuff that I use. There's more of a connection there. So I picked up the full-size Wilson P320 with the Trigicon SRO on there. I've got a Streamlight TLR1, and it mirrors what they use.
Yeah.
And I've also found that in USPSA competition, it's kind of fun shooting carry optics, because in single stack I'm reloading 3, 4, 5 times in a stage.
Right.
This I usually have to reload one time.
Right, you're shooting, right.
Yep, all I have to worry about is reloading that 21 round stick one time, and the rest of it I can just kind of focus on blazing away out there.
Yeah. Man, so I want to actually talk about 2 things real quick. We both have a 320 variant, of course, here on the table. So the first thing, because you mentioned, you brought it up, you said, I used to shoot, shot 45 so much, you could grab the 9mm, it's like shooting a 22.
Yeah.
And I agree, when I'm shooting major, like single stack 40 for a while and start shooting 45s, getting ready for single stack nationals, and then I go back to, ESP or 9mm, it's like, like, oh my God, this is so much fun. It's, the gun's not beating your hands and wrist
Easy.
up. But I want to talk about your grip a little bit, man. So I think, you and I are both strong guys, so we can leverage a lot of force on the gun.
Right.
But one of the things you and I talked about years ago was you tend to really have a very unique angle and hand position. And now, full disclosure, I tend to grip and crush the back of the gun with both hands. And I know my support hand isn't on the back of the gun, but I want to leverage as much pressure as I can back there. And I have students that tend to rotate the hand forward. I think that becomes to an extent a mistake because the hands rotate apart because you're pulling your hand away from that part of the grip. But you pull it off somehow, and part of it is your hand size and strength. But tell me about how you're gripping your gun. What are you feeling on your grip? How much you're gripping with?
So, like you mentioned, hand size and shape is going to be a lot of it. Your hands are different than my hands are different than everyone, and how it interfaces with the gun is always going to be different. So again, always strong hand grip as high into the back strap as you can get.
Yep.
And then I basically just take that other hand, lay it in there just like that. And if I don't have a light on here, I'll actually wrap clear up around the front of the trigger guard. If you don't mind, I'll grab yours there so I can kind of just give an example of that. So if I was gripping this gun, that's how I'd grip it right there.
Yep.
And I'm actually not riding the slide. The highest point on my thumb right there, I've got that nice callus built up, and that's actually from the slide release. And I don't heel the back of the grip. So you were talking about putting force on the back strap. What I do is I actually imagine that there's an upside down horseshoe there. I'm grabbing both ends of it and I'm rotating it straight. And what that does is pinch in together with those thumbs high on that grip, and then that new raw spot right there is basically my fingers pull apart on each other, and I'm essentially just creating a vise right up here on the top of the frame, fighting that recoil as close to the bore axis as I can. And having shot 45s for so long, that's kind of just what my grip naturally developed into. I didn't do it on purpose. I was just fighting recoil.
You had to, especially
I could.
as, like you said, you started out, when I met you, I don't know what age you were certainly not as big and strong as you are now. So that, the leverage point in terms of turning the hands up is unique. I find that I am pressuring the back of the gun, but I also have a little bit of a torque in the top of the gun as well. But it's part of I think, Austin, part of my hand position is also the fact that my gun is in my hand in a little different spot than yours, mainly because my gun is lined up with my left eye. Yours is lined up with your right eye.
And that's a good point.
Which it doesn't cause a lot of people want to get into the whole cross dominant. What's the secret? It's not that big of a deal. I mean, we're only talking about an inch difference in your eyes.
Yeah.
But that's it's interesting that everybody finds a different way to pressure the gun. How hard do you grip the gun when you shoot?
I grip the gun with both hands as hard as I can without inducing an unwanted amount of sight movement.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, without
which
shaking.
Is a lot of words basically means don't shake too much.
Yeah, grip the gun really hard.
Yep, as hard as you can without shaking your sights off your target, basically.
Man, interesting. Okay, so we got to handle another thing else. I know Mr. Ken Hackathorn, our good friend and someone that I respect highly, thinks that optics are a fad. I don't agree with that entirely. Matter of fact, 10 years ago I wrote an article about red dot sights as the future of red dot of defensive pistol sights, and I made a prediction about 10 years ago you'd see them on most handguns. In my classes, more than 60%, 70% of my open enrollment shooters are showing up with red dots. In law enforcement classes, several agencies, full red dot. Several federal agencies, full red dot. What's your thought? What's your prediction on the future of red dot, man?
I think as they become more robust, more reliable, I think we'll get to a point where, sort of like on rifles, iron sights are there purely as a backup, and they'll be lower profile. I mean, how long is it until somebody makes, you know, the first magpul flip-up sights on a pistol that are completely out of the way? You can see that my iron sights are pretty minimalistic on here right now. But again, this is a competition pistol.
Sure.
You know, I don't carry this gun. I don't have a red dot on my carry gun. But that's just because I haven't really found the need for it personally. There is certainly an advantage to having a red dot if you put in the reps and if you practice. And I've seen a lot of your videos. That's what you talk about. You know, it's not going to automatically and make you a better shooter magically. But if you put in the reps to, first of all, trust the dot and then be able to find it quickly and consistently, then it's certainly an advantage. You know, especially as you increase distance, you only have to superimpose one thing instead of lining up three things.
I want to talk about your carry gun here in a second, but I'll tell you, I will put it on record here in front of the cameras. You know, I said 10 years ago I thought you would see predominantly red dots being the future of defensive pistol sighting systems. I'd say in the next 3 years, this year is 2022, if you're watching this and you don't see a date, in 3 years, you're going to see 85% of almost all mainstream handguns with a red dot on them, unless they're a compact gun that's, you know, obviously. And then I think in 5 years, just what you pointed out, I think you're going to see iron-sighted pistols as a rarity. I think a large, I don't know about percentage, but they're going to have a red dot on them. And the red dots are going to get exponentially better. I'm 100% positive about that.
And I think as they become more robust and people trust them more and more, you're starting to see enclosed emitters and they're getting tougher and tougher. So if you do get dirt on the lens, if you do get rain or snow on there, whatever the case may be, it's not going to totally mess up your dot. You're not just going to have a scatter of red light. You'll still be able to find a dot if you can at least get through that lens.
And or the backup side. So your carry gun's not, what is your carry gun? I've never talked to you about your carry gun.
So I've got two that I kind of switch back and forth between. I've got one of the old Vickers G19s, and I kind of did what I shouldn't have done and cut on it a little bit and modified it some, because it is a Vickers Glock, but I modified the back strap a little bit, put one of those little beaver tails on there because that gets the grip angle slightly closer to a 1911, so when I point the gun, I'm not having to nose down the front sight. So I've got a G19 that I carry. I carry both my carry guns IWB, but the G19 is mostly colder months. It's easy to conceal with a hoodie. It's just a little bit more than I'm comfortable concealing, and let's be honest, a lot of concealed carry is comfort, because if you're not willing to carry it, you're not going to. It has to be comfortable enough. It's just tougher for me to conceal that under just a tight t-shirt, which is what I usually wear. I'm not a huge button-down guy, and I could change my wardrobe, but instead I just said, good excuse to buy another gun. So I got a P365 XL, and it lives inside of a Wilson grip module, which is, again, super comfortable. Gets you a little more hand purchase on the gun than the factory one does. I find it to be more ergonomic, and I just kind of alternate between those depending on what is comfortable for me to conceal at the time.
But no red dot?
Not yet.
What will cause, and you're young, how old are you?
25.
25. What a jerk. I hate you, man. I hate you. You're exactly half my age. I'm 50. You're 25. I hate you more. So what will cause you to decide, I'm going to put a red dot on a pistol and carry a red dot on a pistol?
Finding the need for it. I've got tritium inserts in my front sight on both those guns, and a green fiber optic in addition to that. So whether it's daytime or night, I've kind of got best of both worlds, and they both wear weapon-mounted lights. So sight acquisition isn't a huge problem. I can always superimpose those sights on that illuminated background, granted, if my light is working. And then just some of the features that some of the red dots come with, like the auto dimming. Some people come from concealment and there's no dot for a second because the dot's super dimmed down. Battery life is a concern. It's more upkeep than iron sights, for sure. So if you're staying on top of that, and you got to be honest with yourself, if you're good about staying on top of that kind of thing, then
Sure.
absolutely. But
100%.
I know that I'm not necessarily
Right.
great about staying on top of that kind of stuff. Like this battery in my TLR1 is dead. I'm pretty sure it got bumped on the way here.
Yeah.
And I checked it before we came in here. It's drained right now. So I'm gonna have to swap that out before we go do any shooting or before I go to my next match. I don't trust myself enough to stay on top of that to justify having a red dot. But my iron sights, they're always going to be there.
Yeah,
So,
that, I mean, that couldn't be said much better. Number one, you identified the fact that you don't necessarily have a need right now. You have great vision. You don't have any focal issues.
Right.
You know, for years, everybody told me it's going to hit no matter what. Everybody at a certain age is going to have that issue, and it happened. 45 years old, give or take. Can I still shoot an iron-sighted gun pretty good? Yes, I think you know that I but I'm going to be honest with you. It is to the point right now where if I had to take a really hard shot, especially, you know, it gets worse. You old guys know this, right? Early in the morning, I mean, it's going to be difficult. And I tell you another interesting thing. I always tell my students, I would love for you to carry in the same family of guns, because you talked about your Glock and you modified it so it points the same. So if I'm competing a lot with a 1911, me personally, I'm still carrying one of our compact 1911s. I will add a red dot sometime very soon. But I did find myself, because I'm shooting so much carry optic these days with a 320 variant like that, I normally finish a practice session and then I put my carry gun back on and I'll just do a couple draws, right? Before I holster up, right there on the range. Don't shoot all the time, but I just do a couple. And I drew the other day and my brain was looking for a red dot. I'm looking for the awareness of this red dot, and I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. But it also tells me that if I'm competing with a 320 and maybe decided to carry a compact 320 like this, well, that's it's the same angle, and of course, as you said, that's a competition gun. There's no backup iron sights. Absolutely, 100%. I would like another sighting system. I would not trust a red dot, but man, I think I'm there. I have some testing to do with another optic I have, and I'm there. But I have a need. I'm willing to do the time as far as the battery. As we know, I do that enough. And if I'm competing with a red dot, maybe it's time for me to transition over to that. So, so sorry, Ken, I love you, but I'm going against his prediction. So,
and I think as like I said, as technology for red dots gets better, I think you'll see them become more and more pervasive. More and more people will trust them. Longer battery life, tougher dots, stuff like that. I think it'll kind of be the way of the future, just like we saw in rifles.
So you heard it. There's our predictions on red dot. You're not carrying one yet, but I think we both see them in the future. I think that's our prediction. The young guys have made their prediction as well. I will probably have one on my carry gun very, very shortly, and that's it. So hey man, been a great talk. We talked training, we talked red dots, we talked your grip and how my grip maybe varies from your grip, some of the trends we're seeing out there, your decision to make it a little harder on some of us old guys by cutting your finger off. And hey folks, if you're watching this video, if you have a comment or question for us, hey, throw it up there. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that and like the video, share it with a couple buddies. We're trying to get these young guy videos out there, right? We're trying to beat the gun guys with the young guys. So
got to compete with them.
Thanks, brother, man.
Yep.